So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining me. I am Anthony Keach. I'm with Academic Technology Services. And today we're going to be diving into a very high look at Zoom. So this workshop is designed to get people who are not experienced with Zoom at all up to speed with just the basics very, very quickly. So we're not going to be doing a deep dive into a lot of the different tools. We have those resources and we'd be happy to go into that if you have a specific question. We're going to try to get in and out of this pretty quick so you can get into Zoom, start playing around with it, have a few meetings, and then you may develop an interest in some of the deeper tools, or you may come back with some questions or concerns. So we're going to look at creating meetings and managing them and those recordings in the Zoom web portal. This is where, and you have many options, but this is where we're going to do the majority of our control. We're going to look at hosting a Zoom meeting. You guys are in Zoom right now as participants, so you're halfway done, halfway through the battle. But we're going to look at it on my screen with the options you would have as a host. We're going to take a brief look at the D2L Zoom integration, which is a very cool, but actually very simple tool, so it's not as difficult as you might think. And then we're going to save some time at the end for questions, resources, and support, the guides and the different material you guys have at your disposal. But since this is interactive, feel free to jump in anytime, either with your microphone or a chat, and we'll keep this pretty informal. So if you have a question or concern, please yell it out. I do want to bring to your attention that this is being recorded. So while it can be informal, let's not make it too informal, because this is going to go out to the whole world as soon as we're done. And if you get cut off for any reason, if you feel like you have to go, if you feel like this is too low level, anything like that, absolutely feel free to step out. I do want to draw your attention to this primary resource before you go. If you remember nothing else, remember this link, www.etsu.edu/Zoom. This is your central hub for the guides and resources we put up. It's also going to have a login so you can jump right into Zoom. And I see somebody needs the meeting ID. Let me get that for you. No problem. Anne-Marie, I just sent you a link to the meeting, and those last 9 digits in that URL, that is the meeting ID. So if somebody needs to get in, absolutely share that with them. They should be able to jump right in. All right, moving on. So who has Zoom? So all faculty and staff and all of your students, every student at ETSU has a pro-level Zoom account that is kind of waiting for activation. It's not on by default. Activation is very simple and doesn't require the work of anybody else. All anyone has to do to activate their pro-level Zoom account is log in to Zoom through ETSU. We're going to look at where and exactly how to do that in just a moment. But everybody has the ability to have a Zoom Pro account. What does a Pro account mean? It means that there are no limits to the number of meetings you can create. It means that there are no time limits on those meetings as well. So if you've ever signed up for a free Zoom account in the past, if you had over 2 participants, if you had 3 or over, then your meeting was capped at 45 minutes. With the Pro level, you have no such cap. You can have a meeting going for an hour, for 3 hours, 5 hours, whatever you may need. It's also got a very, very high cap for the number of participants you can have in there. Currently, you can have up to 300 participants in one normal Zoom meeting. That sounds like a lot of chaos to me. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. But if you're doing a one-to-many, kind of like a large auditorium, large classroom setting, you can certainly do that here. You may want to keep all your participants muted or something along those lines. And along with that 300 participants, I want to point out that right now, you can see either several people's video cameras in your participant list. If their video is turned off, you may just see their name. You can see up to 49 of those. So you can't see up to 300 if you have 300 participants, but you can see up to 49 different video panes in Zoom at one time. After 49, once you hit 50, you're going to have to page over to the second page, third page, and so on. Those screens are going to get very, very small, kind of Brady Bunch style, so I'm not sure 49 is really going to help that much if you're having a lively discussion, but from a technical standpoint, it can be done. Cloud recording is also available with the Pro account. This is a pretty powerful feature. It's what we're using right now to record this meeting. And what it means is you can record everything that happens in a Zoom meeting with a couple of exceptions, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. And it will be available on the cloud, so you don't have to download it to your local machine, although you certainly can. That cloud recording is not eternal. It doesn't last forever. Currently, it's available for 1 year on the Zoom hosting service. So for 1 year, you can go back and watch or download any of your recordings. And we'll look at where you can do that in just a moment. So how do you get into Zoom? Well, you have a lot of options. And while a lot of options can sometimes be fun, it's a double-edged sword because it can lead to a little bit of confusion. You can get into Zoom by downloading the Zoom software, sometimes called the client, the Zoom client on either a PC or a Mac computer. You can log in that way. You could download the apps if you have a mobile device, mobile phone, tablet, something like that. You can download it from the App Store or the Google Play Store, so it supports iOS and Android. And you can get in now through D2L directly. So we're going to look at a couple of things here through Zoom, but remember that you could do all of this directly through D2L. You would never actually have to go to Zoom. But there is one place that has more options, more control, more things available to you than all of these other options, and that is the web portal. We've got that link right up here at the top. I'm going to get my little fancy annotations. Right here. So this link right here, etsu.zoom.us. That link is where you can log in on any browser from any computer, and you can get access to all of your controls for Zoom. We'll take a look at that here right now. Let me get rid of this drawing here. I'm going to drag in here a simple browser. I'm going to go to that address, which was etsu.zoom.us. Don't forget the ETSU, or you'll go to the normal Zoom page. And if you get there, then it will be asking you for a Zoom account, not an ETSU Zoom account, and it could throw you off. You'll know you're in the right place because you'll see the ETSU logo and you'll see a picture of our campus in the background. The regular Zoom will not have that. That's how you know you're in the right place. And you'll see two options. Those two options will allow you to join a meeting, and we'll talk about that a little bit more once we start creating that. But to join a meeting, you don't have to be logged in. All you need is either the URL link or the meeting ID, which is a 9-digit code. It's going to be very important, and we'll see one when we create a meeting. But if somebody has shared either the link or the 9-digit meeting ID code with me, then I can hit join a meeting, and I can join even without logging in. This means that anybody you invite to a Zoom meeting, whether they're an ETSU affiliate or not, can join in. So maybe you have a guest speaker, maybe you're meeting with colleagues at another university, and they don't have a Zoom account. That's not a problem. They can still join your Zoom meeting. They can't host a Zoom meeting, but they can join a Zoom meeting. The other option we have here is sign in. Once I hit sign in, since I'm already logged in with this browser, it's going to take me to my control panel here. But if you weren't already logged in, it's going to use single sign-on to log you in. So in essence, it's the exact same way you log into your ETSU mail when you're using a browser, which means if you have two-factor authentication activated, which most faculty and staff and some students already do, you're going to have to authenticate your identity, meaning that you're not going to be able to log into Zoom, start or host your meeting unless you've got your authentication device with you. Usually that's going to be a mobile phone for most people. So we're in the shared library right now. It's got a lot of concrete around us. Depending on your mobile provider, don't always have a good signal for these guys. And sometimes I have trouble getting texts. So this is kind of off the topic of Zoom, but we normally recommend that you use the Authenticator app. That way you can get it without relying on a cell signal if you need to get in. You won't be able to get into Zoom and launch your meeting if you can't authenticate yourself. So let's take a look at this panel. There's a lot of options in here. We're just going to talk about a few of them. I'm going to go ahead and annotate this. We'll start over here on this side. If I click on profile, which is where I'll come in, it's pulling this information, very, very basic information from Banner. So if your name looks a little bit different, if maybe you go by nickname or something like that, just know that it's coming from Banner and we'd have to change it there in order to get our information updated here in Zoom. Also, we have a profile picture. So this profile picture, mine's set to a logo of Information Technology Services, but it could be set to anything, your professional office picture or whatever it might be. And while normally this is very nice to have if you're in Office 365 or if you're in D2L, it's extra important here because if I stop my video, I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to stop my video for a moment. Notice that it defaults to my profile picture when I'm not using my video. If you don't have a profile picture uploaded and you're not sharing your video, you'll see what you're seeing from the rest of the participants in the meeting right now. You'll just see their name show up on a black background. I'm going to go ahead and start my video again. My profile picture goes away. So this is something you want to think about because a lot of people in a meeting will see it if you're not sharing your video. We also have something called a personal meeting ID. We're going to talk about this briefly, but this is not something I recommend that you give out to too many people. Your personal meeting ID is an internal Zoom meeting that's reserved for you and it's always open. So giving this out is kind of like giving your office address or your phone number to somebody. It means they can jump into your personal meeting at any time. This is fantastic if you're meeting with a colleague very, very often. You're constantly jumping in and out of a meeting. You don't want to schedule one, create one, and then share a temporary code with them. They can jump in here. But it's not something that I would give out to everybody or necessarily put in like an email signature or something like that. So I'd just be a little bit cautious with who you share this personal meeting ID with. We're going to come back to meetings here in a minute. I'm going to jump down to settings, and we're not going to spend a lot of time here, but I want you to be aware that you have at your control a great deal of settings through Zoom. The admins, myself included, have gone through these, and we've tried to set defaults that make the most sense for teaching a synchronous class through Zoom. But we realize that there are a lot of other uses for this software. And you may be using it for an interview. You may be using it for a committee or a peer meeting or office hours or a thesis defense, any number of different things. And when you set up the meeting, because you're using it for a different objective than just a class, you may want to change your defaults. And you can do that when you create a meeting. But if you find you're always creating these Zoom sessions for an interview, you may want to come into this settings tab and change your personal defaults so they don't have to change them every single time you're creating a meeting. That will make a little bit more sense when we go through creating a meeting, which we're going to do here in a minute. If you see defaults that you don't like, you likely have the option to come in here and change them. And I'm just going to scroll through this so you can see where we have a lot of options at our disposal. By and large, most people should not need to come in here and change anything if they don't want to. We'll come back and look at recordings a little bit later, but just note that this is where I can come in and manage the recordings that I have made. I can delete them, share them, view them, all through this recordings tab on the left. Let's come over to meetings. So this is where it will default me when I come in. This is my central hub for meetings. At a glance, I can see upcoming meetings. If I've scheduled meetings for other people, I can also see that here. So if I come into my meetings, there's the meeting that we are all in right now. And I see with the green dot that this meeting is active, and I have the join feature. I'm already in it, so I'm not going to jump into it now. And I can see previous meetings that are still going on, that started earlier, or future meetings that are coming up very soon. I can also click on previous meetings, and I can see a list of different meetings that I've created in the past, going all the way back. My personal meeting room and meeting templates, we're not going to get into right now. And I want to draw your attention to these options in the top. This is where you're going to spend a lot of time with join a meeting. Again, we had that option before we ever logged in because it is not necessary to log in with your ETSU credentials to join a meeting. And here's schedule a meeting. I'm going to skip over some of these other options and hit schedule a meeting because this is the primary way we recommend that you create a meeting. And that's why we are all here. This blue schedule a meeting is the exact same option as this schedule a meeting up at the top. You can get to it either way. I'm going to go ahead and step on schedule a new meeting. And we're going to get a couple of very universal fields. Turns out that scheduling a Zoom meeting is very similar to scheduling a calendar event. You're going to have a lot of the same fields here. And almost anywhere that you schedule a meeting through any of those access points we talked about, like the client, the app, or through D2L, you're going to see very similar, if not the exact same settings to create a meeting. So we'll go over this once and it'll apply in a lot of different areas. The topic, this would just be like an event topic. So this might be open office hours for a class, or an interview or a committee defense or just about anything you want. The description is optional, and I'll be honest with you, it's usually hidden. So this description is not super helpful unless you're going to require registration for your Zoom meetings. So I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time crafting this really excellent description unless you're going to use that registration feature. But you certainly can if you want. I usually leave it blank. Just like with a calendar invite, I can put in a date, a day, a time, and a duration. So I might set this for the future. 10 a.m. looks good. Maybe I'll make it 1 p.m. And I've got a duration here. So I might set this for 2 hours. But I might really get into some lively discussion with my team. And 2 hours isn't enough time. This is just information for your participants, especially going out in an invite that gives them a rough idea on how long you expect this meeting to take. It's not going to cut off my Zoom meeting. It's not going to cut off my Zoom recording at any time. So this is an approximate ballpark. Don't worry about this ending your meeting. Of course, we want our time zone set correctly. I can set, just like with a calendar invite, I can set this to be a recurring meeting. Maybe I want my office hours to happen every week on Monday and Wednesday. But I only want them to happen for the semester. So I'll set them for 15 weeks and then they're going to end. And with one meeting ID, with one URL link, I've now created up to 15 meetings because it's recurring. I'm going to turn that off. Here's our registration option. If I require registration, then instead of getting a link or a meeting ID to jump right into the meeting, Zoom is going to force them to put in a little bit of information about themselves, like their name and their email, and then it's going to email them a link to the registration. That is fantastic in a training scenario where you need to know how many people are coming. It can be a little bit of a barrier to entry if you're trying to get students in there quickly. And if you're going through D2L, this becomes pretty moot because only the people in your D2L site are going to be able to see the Zoom link anyway. But know that this option is here if you need it. When you are creating a meeting, you may not see this next option right away. Schedule for, right now it says myself, but I have the ability to schedule for a few other people. I have that ability because they have granted me that access. So I might be scheduling a Zoom conference for my colleague Mark because he is giving me that access. I can schedule it for him, very similar to an assistant who's scheduling a calendar invite or a meeting for you. This comes down to that personal meeting ID that we talked about before. By default, when I create a meeting, it's going to generate an automatic temporary 9-digit meeting ID. I can choose here to use my personal ID meeting. Again, this is not something I would give out very often and only in very specific circumstances. So I generally recommend creating an automatic and temporary meeting ID. Leave that on default. I can set a meeting password. It can be anything that I want. But it is something that I absolutely need to share with anybody that I want coming into the meeting. I find this not all that helpful because the generated random ID almost acts like a password. It's a random 9-digit number that nobody else is going to have except those that I share it with. If somebody wanted to secretly give my meeting ID to somebody else, they could also give this meeting password to somebody else. But if you could think of a good situation where you need this, absolutely turn it on and have that option. This next option, video, can cause a little bit of confusion. So we're going to pause here and we're going to talk about it briefly. This says host, video on or video off, and participant, video on or video off. And sometimes people think that this is setting the entire state for the meeting. And then if I select off, my participants will not be able to share their video. And that's a little misleading. That's not what's happening here. What this is talking about is the default state somebody will be requested to come in as. So in this particular scenario, when I start the meeting, I'm not going to have to turn my video on. It's automatically going to be on as the host. So as soon as I start, I have the ability to stop my video, just like I've just now done, and start my video. This setting's not controlling my ability to start and stop video. And the same is true for my participants. If I have a lot of participants coming in, especially if they're students, they may not be aware that their video is going to be turned on. They may not be situated yet when they first sit down and start connecting to their meeting. They may have something in the background that they're not quite ready to broadcast out to the rest of the group. So as a courtesy, I usually leave participant video off. Any of you right now, if you have a webcam, could start your video. It's not stopping participants from starting their video. I could even, as we'll see in a minute here, request that you start your video. But at no time can I actually force you to start either your microphone or your video. I don't have that kind of control over your hardware. And for both legal, ethical, and privacy reasons, I'm glad that I don't. I don't want the ability to accidentally start up hardware that you're not aware of. If I was meeting with a small group and we were pretty close and we did this often, I might create a meeting where that participant video is already on. Everybody just pops in with their video on and removes one more hurdle of them having to start it once they're in the meeting. Audio, these are simply the options that people will have when they log into a Zoom meeting in order to connect to the audio, both through speakers and a microphone. This is one of the few options that the administration has locked to be on. We want everybody that joins Zoom to have the option to join either via telephone or computer audio. We recommend using computer audio. That's what I'm using now. That requires a microphone to be attached to my device and speakers in order to hear people. That could be a headset, that could be a webcam, that could be speakers and microphone in a classroom, multimedia classroom here at ETSU. But people also have the option to join as a host or as a presenter or a participant with a telephone. So if you're using a machine that doesn't have a microphone, doesn't have a camera attached or good speakers on it, then you can join with the computer, but you can always call in with a phone, and it works very much like a conference call. And we get to these last 5 options, which again can be a little bit confusing. So we're going to walk through those very slowly. The first one says enable join before host. So I've set up this meeting. I'm the host of this meeting, but maybe I want to allow people to get in because I know I'm not going to be able to start this meeting until exactly 9 o'clock, right when it begins. I want people to be able to get in there and converse themselves, kind of like students coming into a classroom before the instructor actually shows up. So I could enable join before host, allowing people in. But this isn't just 5, 10, or 15 minutes before the meeting. This means as soon as they have that link, they can get in at any time. And every once in a while, we'll see somebody jump into a meeting at 2 in the morning because they were either testing the link, maybe they wanted to make sure they could get in and that their equipment worked, and that's a fine reason. Maybe they stepped on the link accidentally. It doesn't matter. The door's not locked. They can get into the meeting. We're going to look at where that might be important down here. If they get into a meeting and the host is not in there, it can't hurt anything. They're not doing anything wrong. They'll probably leave pretty quickly because nothing's going on in there. The second option, mute participants upon entry, very, very similar to the video option up here, but this option is going to turn off participants' microphones when they first come in. Again, that's just the default initial state. They can always unmute so that they can talk once they're situated in the room. But if you have 40, 50, 60 people coming into a Zoom room and they all have their microphones on, you often end up with some kind of just shuffling as people are getting ready, they're sitting down, and the microphone's picking that up times 30, 40, 50, however many people are in there. So muting participants upon entry is usually a good idea for the host, just to make sure the room is quiet and that there's not a lot of feedback or noise happening through all the different microphones. And then people can unmute as they want to talk. There's an enable waiting room option. A lot of people turn this on thinking it's something different than it is. The waiting room gives the host, so myself in this case, the ability to approve every single person trying to come into the room. So from a participant viewpoint, if this was enabled, they would first enter this sort of weird lobby-like purgatory where they're not fully in the Zoom room and they're not out of the Zoom room either. And they're waiting on the host in order to bring them in. This can be very, very dangerous if you forget to bring somebody in. From the host standpoint, you may think they haven't arrived yet and you haven't actually let them in, or that they're in and they're just being very quiet because you haven't allowed them into the full room. So be careful with this option. The fourth option here is pretty simple. Only authenticated users can join. I said earlier that anybody can join a Zoom meeting with that join button that's still up here at the top. If they have the 9-digit ID, they don't have to have a Zoom account. If I selected this, that would no longer be true. They would have to log in with their Zoom account in order to join my meeting. And then finally, we have record the meeting automatically in the cloud. This is a very divisive option. It's a double-edged sword. Personally, I always turn this on. I like it because I am the worst when it comes to remembering to start my recording once I'm in a Zoom meeting. So if I click this option, once anybody starts the meeting, once anybody joins the meeting, it's automatically going to kick off a recording. And while that's very helpful, and you may turn that on thinking there's no problem with that, let me draw your attention back up to this top option here, enable join before the host. Remember we said that anybody can join your Zoom meeting if this is enabled. If they join before you're in there, at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, whenever they may join, even if it's only for 5 minutes before they jump back out, and I have recorded the meeting automatically in the cloud, I just recorded that tiny meeting of somebody, one person jumping into the meeting and then jumping back out. Nobody's going to see that recording unless I share it, unless they're in D2L, and we'll get to that in a little bit. So it doesn't really create a big problem, except it may generate 3, 4, 5 very short recordings that aren't of any interest or value to me, and it's going to kind of clog up my cloud area. I can easily go in and delete them, but you may not want to deal with that. So I often recommend checking one or the other, but not both, of the enable join before host will record the meeting automatically. Let me give you one more tip about the enable join before host. What does the participant see if that is not checked and they try to get into the meeting before the host is there? Some of you may have tried this with this meeting. They'll just cut kind of a gray area that says you're in the Zoom meeting, you can test your audio and video, but we'll start once the host arrives. And that's all they'll see until the host gets in, and then they'll automatically be brought into the meeting. So I think this is a fine option to leave unchecked. And I usually check the record the meeting automatically in the cloud. Our final option here is an alternative host. If I have a colleague that I trust to run my meeting, especially if I think for some reason I may not be able to be there, maybe I have an inconsistent internet or just a timing issue where I may have to leave, I could put in an alternative host, and any ETSU address will work here if they have activated their Zoom account. So if I have somebody that is an ETSU faculty, staff, or student, but they have not yet logged into Zoom at least one time, which activates their account, and I put in their address here, then it's going to bark at me and say this person doesn't exist in Zoom yet because they haven't activated their account. Otherwise, I just put in their email address, and they would have the ability to start and host this meeting whether I was there or not. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. We're going to get a little summary of the options I've chosen for my open office hours meeting here. And we're going to get 2 very important options that I want to point out. One is the join URL. Really, that's usually all I need. I can copy that and I can put that in D2L. I can send that out in an email or instant message. I could text it to somebody. I can get that URL to any of my participants in any number of ways, and that's all they need to join the meeting. But if I want to give them a little bit of extra information, I can come over here to this copy the invitation button, and I get a pop-up with a lot of different information about the meeting, how to join it, phone numbers to call if they want to use their phone instead of using their computer, speakers and microphone, as well as a slew of other information that, to be honest, most people will never need. Join by SIP, join by H323, these are kind of ITV web conference system things that if you're using a special room like that, you may need to hook up, but 99 times out of 100, nobody's going to need that information. I can copy that meeting invitation, I can plop it into an email, put it in a D2L news item, anything that I want, and get that out to my people. I'm going to pause here for just a moment and make sure that there are no questions on creating, sharing, or managing a Zoom meeting through this web portal. Everybody with me so far?
It's Gary Leonard. I've got some questions.
My speakers aren't great in here. I didn't catch that. Can you try that one more time?
Gary Leonard. You get that? I've got a question about, am I coming in okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead with your question.
Okay. Going back to setting up the meeting.
Sure.
And I have 21 students in a class.
Okay.
So how do I give those 21 students access to that class period?
Okay. Good question.
Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
So the question was, how do you get your students? You've got a large group of students, 21. how do you, in the easiest way, get them this invite to the meeting? I'm going to show you 2 ways. One is definitely easier than the other, and we're going to get to that towards the end of this workshop. So I'll definitely get there. But from this web portal, I could easily create a meeting. I'll call it class session. I'll turn my speakers down just a bit. Class session. I would set this for the time of my class. So let's say we're meeting Tuesday and Thursday at 8:15. I'm going to say start it next Tuesday. And I'll probably start it for 8, just to give them a little bit of a runway. So 8 a.m. And the class is going to meet for an hour. And we'll go ahead and put 15 minutes in there. It's Tuesday, Thursday class. And I'm going to set this up for a recurring meeting. So I want it to happen weekly, and I want it to happen on Tuesday and Thursday. But I want it to end by the end of the semester. So let's say we're going to graduate around the 8th, somewhere in there. So this is going to happen every single Tuesday and Thursday at 8 a.m. It's going to start, and it's going to go for an hour and 15 minutes. And it's going to end by the time the semester ends. So I'm not going to have to create another meeting. This will be the only meeting that I have to create. I could go through these options, whatever I want. I may record it. Maybe I don't want to let the students in unless I'm there. Maybe I do. Maybe I'm not going to be there one day and I want them to be able to get in and communicate with each other, so I could leave that on. But in that case, I may want to turn this off, and I'm going to hit save. Then what I would probably do is put this link inside D2L. So I don't have to invite them through email or anything like that. Individually, I would put that in a news post or content area, something where all my students can get it. And I would put in big bold letters, this is the meeting. Join this meeting at 8 o'clock every Tuesday and Thursday. Now that's the hard way to do it. And even that's not that hard. Once we get to the D2L Zoom integration, I'm going to show an even easier way to make sure all your students can see that meeting link. Does that sound good?
Sounds real good. I got something else for you.
Okay.
You'll scroll down, the mute.
Yeah.
Mute participants upon entry.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. What does that do? And what's that symbol at the end of the line?
Yeah. So that symbol basically means that this is a fairly new feature. And if you're using an older version of the Zoom client, which most people shouldn't be at ETSU, since we haven't had it all that long, it also stays up to date pretty well. But if you have an older version of the Zoom client, then you won't be able to control their mute when they come in. That's what that stands for. And you'll see that in a couple of different options across Zoom that basically says this option is new. You have to have a certain version of Zoom or later to have it. Again, we have access to the newest version of Zoom. So this would only be for somebody who had a client on their computer and they didn't update it. Essentially what this does is it's going to set the default state of my participants. When they come in, whether they're students or peers or whoever they are, when they come in, their microphone is automatically going to be muted, and they're going to have to unmute to talk. So when you came into this meeting, Gary, your microphone was muted, and you had to go down into the bottom left and hit unmute in order to ask a question, and then you could mute yourself again or not, depending on what you want to do. It's just that initial state when people come in.
All right, thank you.
No problem. Good questions. So this is where things are going to get a little bit weird, because we are inside of Zoom, and I'm going to try to share what I'm seeing in Zoom as the host. So you may get what looks like a little bit of a double vision here, but I'm going to pull my Zoom window over into my share window and let everybody see that. Can everybody see that pretty well? There we go. So this is what I see as the host. It should look probably very, very similar to what you see as a participant. So inside your Zoom participant window, you're now seeing my screen with my host window. I know it's a little bit confusing. When we're using Zoom to teach Zoom, it's the best we can do. So I just want to go over a couple of options that you have once you're inside a Zoom meeting, specifically as the host. We're going to start at the bottom. Notice that if I stop moving my mouse for a little bit, these options at the very bottom of my screen go away. As soon as I move my mouse towards the bottom of my Zoom window, they will pop up. So if you're sitting still, you're not moving your mouse, it sometimes looks like those options aren't there. You have to trigger them by moving your mouse somewhat near them. The first two options, let's see if I can annotate this. The first two options are down here in the corner. They are my mute and unmute option. When I'm unmuted, I can see a little visual feedback there that my microphone is picking up my voice. If I step on that, I will mute. I'm going to stop talking for just a moment so you can see what that looks like. So you'll notice that when I was muted, there was a big red line right through that microphone, giving me a very good indication that my microphone is muted and that nobody can hear what I'm saying. I also have the exact same options with stop video. So if I stop my video, again, it will default to my profile picture that I set up personally in my profile account. And then I can click on that again, and it will start my video feed. Video is something I might turn off if I wasn't the main host, if it was a large group, or if my bandwidth wasn't great, my internet speed wasn't great or wasn't very consistent, I might turn off that video just to save me a little bit of bandwidth. Do note that next to both the microphone and the camera, there's a little caret, and these will give you a pop-up option with several different options in it. Depending on the system you're on, your options may look a little bit different. This allows me to change my speaker, to change my microphone, to anything else that I have plugged up to this particular computer. So I'm in our lab. We have a couple of different camera options and a couple of different speaker options. I could select one individually, or I could say, use the defaults on my computer. I can also test my speaker and microphone. When I first join a Zoom meeting, I get this option as well, and it's very, very important for both the host and the participants to go through this. Because testing your speaker and microphone, it probably saves about 90% of the questions or problems that come up with Zoom. By and large, Zoom has not been a very glitchy program, although do keep in mind that it is complex technology, and you're using your internet, your operating system, Zoom as a web conferencing platform, a microphone, a camera. There's a lot of different things interacting, and any one of them could be a fail point. So it does happen. But usually the issues we see are that somebody has muted their microphone by accident, or they've forgotten to plug in their webcam and they're not seeing their video, or something along those lines. This test speaker and microphone option allows you to catch those before you get into a meeting. It's very, very powerful. If my speakers for some reason went out on my computer, or I was getting bad feedback, or any other number of problems came up, I could come here and immediately switch to phone audio instead of computer audio on the fly. I don't have to get out of the meeting in order to do that. And these are settings that both the participants and the hosts had. So if you hit your little caret, you should see very similar settings. I don't have as many cameras hooked up, so I don't have as many settings there. But I don't have to be a host in order to get these settings. Moving along the bottom, I have an invite feature. If I'm already in a meeting, I can still invite somebody. I don't have to go back out to the web portal. By clicking this, I get several different people in my contacts list. I get several different options to invite someone. But what I usually do is just come down here to the bottom left and I say either copy that URL. Again, in general, that's mostly what people need to get into a meeting. Or I could say copy the invitation, which is that big list of information we saw earlier in the web portal. Let me clean this off here. I have a manage participants option. This is very, very powerful for the host. It allows me to do a whole lot of things. Notice that I can, I'll turn the chat off there. I can toggle it off and on, and it adds this little sidebar over here to my Zoom window. So that's where it's putting that manage participants list. And if I, just at its very most basic, I have a list of everybody who is in the meeting. I also can mouse over them, and I have a couple of different controls. There's me, it indicates that I am the host, and it indicates me, and I in the meeting will always be on top. I could mute myself directly from here, as I could with anybody in the meeting. This is very important if you have a participant that joins into the meeting, they start their microphone, and suddenly there's a lot of feedback or there's some kind of problem, it's very, very loud, and you need to shut that down so that they can get that technology issue under control. I would come over here real quickly and I would hit mute to anybody who is unmuted. I can also rename myself, and I can rename other people. So by default, this is not locked. I could rename myself to something that makes a little bit more sense instead of pulling in the default there. Most people come in with their names, so I don't have to worry about that too much. Down here at the bottom, I have quite a few other options for my participants. That mute participant on entry that we saw when we created the meeting, and Gary, you asked about, that option exists here as well. So maybe I forgot to turn that on when I created the meeting. I could come in here and quickly turn that on, and any future participants that came in would be muted by default when they came in, and they could unmute themselves. I can determine whether my participants can unmute themselves at all. Maybe this is a one-to-many scenario, and I don't want people to have the ability to verbally start their microphone and talk because that would interrupt the session. Maybe I want them to just be able to chat, or maybe I don't want them to be able to talk until a certain time, like a question and answer time at the end. If you had up to 300 participants, this would probably be a good idea. So I can come here and I could uncheck this, and then I can mute people, and the participants would not be allowed to unmute themselves. I can also determine whether participants can rename themselves or not. Maybe I don't want them to have the ability to rename themselves. This option is off by default, but if I turned it on, I would get a small doorbell chime anytime somebody came into the meeting or left the meeting. If a lot of people are coming in and out often, this is going to get very annoying very quickly. But this can be very powerful if I have a very sensitive meeting going on. Maybe it's an interview process. I know everybody that's in the meeting is supposed to be there. I might turn that on, and it just gives me another indication that somebody's joined, maybe that isn't supposed to be there, got in a little bit early or came in late. And it lets me know that so I don't miss it. And another good option that goes along with that is I can lock the meeting. If I know that everybody who's registered for this meeting is here and I don't want anyone else to get into the meeting, then I could come down here and lock the meeting. It's very much like locking the door on a classroom. Nobody else is going to be able to get into that meeting. That was under the More area down here in the bottom right of Manage Participants. I have some more options next to individuals, to participants as well. So if Melanie is doing a great job, she's adding a lot of value to my session, I could come over here to More, and maybe I could make her a host or make her a co-host if I had to step out, or if I needed Melanie to help me manage everything that's going on in the meeting. Again, I could rename her. Maybe we're talking about Melanie. Maybe Melanie is giving a thesis defense and we're her board. And after she's done presenting to us, we need her to step out so that we can deliberate on how she did. Instead of asking her to leave the meeting, and then we're kind of at her mercy to rejoin the meeting when she wants to, we can use this option, put on hold. And that's going to send her to kind of a quiet area where she can't hear or talk to us. She can't see anything that's going on. She's kind of stuck off in the corner for a little bit. It's like kicking her out of the room. And then we have the ability to bring her back in. So Melanie, I'm sorry, I'm going to pick on you for a moment. I'm going to put you on hold. You're not going to hear anything that's going to happen for the next few seconds, but you'll be able to see it on my screen, since or everybody else will be able to see it on my screen. Watch where she goes and put her on hold. So now I get a clear indication one person is on hold. It's great. I could even message that person and say 5 more minutes, and then we're going to bring you back, and we can continue to deliberate about her. And then I simply come up next to her name and say, take off hold. Melanie, could you hear anything that I was saying?
No, I couldn't hear anything. It's like being put in timeout there.
All right, we were talking about you, but we brought you back now. Some other options I have, I can remove somebody. Again, if somebody's in the meeting that isn't supposed to be there, they're not bringing value to the meeting, or perhaps they're bringing some disruption to the meeting, I can remove them, and they by default will not be able to get back in unless they go to a different computer and sign in under a different name. They're not going to be able to come back into the meeting. I can also chat directly with here, but we'll look at the chat features in just a second. So I have a lot of options, pretty easy to understand just by clicking over somebody's name and hitting More. I said earlier that I do not have the power as the host to turn on somebody's video or microphone, but I have an unmute option here. So we have several participants that are muted. Melanie, I'm going to pick on you one more time. If I click unmute, it does not unmute Melanie's microphone. What it does is it sends a message to that participant and requests that they turn on their microphone in order to be heard. But I can't control it. I can't force them to do that. I can do the same thing with video. I can ask them to start their video, but it's a request. They don't have to do that. Now, you can take points away from your students or something along those lines, and then they'll have to comply. But from a technical standpoint, you can't force them to turn it on. That was manage participants. I'm going to skip over polls. That's a little bit more for advanced deep dive, but know that there is polling options within Zoom. I can share my screen. That's what I'm doing right now. If I click this, it's going to turn off the share. But if I share my screen, it's going to ask me exactly what I want to share. And I think I actually have that in a slide over here. Let me see if I can find a good share screen option. No, let's see here. Well, I'm not seeing it right now. I know it's in here. There we go. So this is a screenshot of what the share screen option will look like. Again, I don't want to touch it right now because I'll stop sharing the screen. But when I hit share screen, I'm going to see a lot of options pop up. And what it's showing me is all the different applications I have running right now on this computer. So I've got PowerPoint running in the background here. If I hit share screen, I would see PowerPoint as one of the applications on here. It's also going to give me the option to just share my desktop, share anything that is on my screen right now. If I have two screens, if I have a dual monitor setup, it's going to allow me to choose which screen I want to share. That's actually what I'm doing in here right now. So everything on this screen, anything that I drag in or bring up on this desktop, this monitor, is going to be shared with you guys as participants. Be careful when you select these screen options. It's usually what I recommend doing. It's what I like to do, but it's going to share anything on the screen. So if I forgot and left my email up in the background and something comes in, everybody's going to be able to see it. And again, if I'm recording this meeting, it's going to be part of that recording. There's another very, very important option in this area. When I hit share screen and I choose what I want to share, there's a tiny option down here in the bottom left that says share computer sound. This is a very powerful feature of Zoom that not a lot of Zoom or other web conferencing systems have. It allows me to share the audio coming out of my computer with my Zoom participants. An example for that is if I had participants and I'm going through a PowerPoint and then I suddenly wanted to share a YouTube clip or some other video clip or some kind of multimedia that has sound. I can do that if I've selected this option. They'll be able to hear it. Otherwise, they'll be able to see it, but they won't be able to hear it. And they'll let you know, hopefully, very quickly. And then you can just reshare the screen and make sure you select this option. There's no way currently to default this to on. That's something we've requested. And as soon as they do that at Zoom, we'll let you know. That'll be exciting because most of the time I want that on, and even I forget to turn that on quite often. I'm going to bring the Zoom window back in here. And we'll just continue down at the bottom with the chat feature. Chat is very, very simple. When I turn it on, it also pops up over here in the sidebar. I'm going to turn off manage participants for just a moment. And you can see my chat here. Since I'm sharing it, you can see that I've had some private chats down here at the bottom. I have the option, and so do you as participants right now. You can chat to other people or to myself, or I could chat to everybody in the meeting. This is going to broadcast something out to everybody in the meeting at once. So this is a good way to test and see if they can hear you, if your audio is working, if your microphone's working, or I could send a private meeting to somebody specifically. I also have some options with what I allow in terms of chat to my meeting participants. Over here under the more, I can save the chat. Maybe I want to keep a record of everything that's happened here. I can turn off chat so that participants can chat with nobody. Maybe I want them to be able to chat, but only with me as the host. Maybe that's the only place they need to be sending information. So I could turn that on. Maybe I want them to be able to chat with everybody publicly, but not send private messages to each other, and I can turn that on. Or by default, everybody has the ability to talk with everybody else, including private chat between participants. And if you guys are using private chat between participants right now to talk to each other, there's no way that I can see that, and that will not be part of any recording. So if you leave that on, your participants can talk behind your back, they can say whatever they want to say, and there's no way to get that information. If you turn that off, if you don't want them to do that, do keep in mind, realistically, they probably have 100 other ways that they can communicate with each other that's not part of Zoom that you would never know about. Once I'm recording a meeting, we have some pause, stop, or record, stop recording options here. I have a pause and I have a stop. If I didn't have a recording going right now, this would just be a big red button that says start the recording. And that's something that I have to remember to do if I didn't set up that automatically record when I set up the meeting. And I always forget to do that. If we were going to take a break, maybe we're going to take 5, I would come in here and hit pause the recording. That's still going to give me one overall recording for this entire session, but it's going to cut out that middle piece where I hit pause. You simply have to remember to resume the recording when you're done with your break. And again, that's something I forget to do all the time. If I hit stop, this recording would end and it would immediately start processing on the cloud. If I wanted to pick it back up, I would hit record again, but it would give me a second recording, a second video for this Zoom session. Very similar to polls, we're going to skip over breakout rooms, reactions, and some of the more deep dive features. Again, if you want to get into that, you can stick around after this meeting and ask a specific question, or go to that etsu.edu/Zoom and we'll take a look at it there. There's a lot of guides and resources that get into some of this more nitty-gritty stuff. That's pretty much everything that you need in Zoom. That's not everything that's in Zoom. There are a lot more options and there's a lot of stuff we can talk about, but that's what you need to get Zoom up and going and running as a host. Any questions about anything we talked about in there or anything that I can dive into or show you a little bit more specifically before we jump into the D2L integration? Okay, looks like we're feeling pretty good about that. Remember, you can interrupt me at any time if you have a specific question. That's not a problem. So let's take a look at Zoom inside of D2L. This is very, very cool, very simple, but there's some important things to know. So if I open up a new browser and I go to D2L, I'm going to log in as an instructor. If I can remember my password under pressure, I'm going to jump into just a kind of a fake course here, a little development site. As of now, if you're using a standard nav bar at the top, you may notice a new option. It's this link right here between A to Z and Edit Course, a Zoom option that wasn't there a few days ago. For those who are interested in teaching a synchronous online class, this was an opt-in option for the past few semesters. You could turn it on, but it wasn't on by default. With remote online instruction becoming at the forefront here, we have turned that on for everybody. If you're teaching an asynchronous class or for some other reason you're not going to use Zoom to teach synchronously, and there are many legitimate reasons not to do so, you can turn that back off if you don't want to cause some confusion by having it there for your students. But by default, every D2L course now has a Zoom link if you're using the standard nav bar. What does that mean? Get rid of this. When I click on this, just straight from D2L, when I click on Zoom, it's going to take me, when I click on the Zoom link inside D2L, it's going to take me to a small Zoom dashboard, a control panel right here in D2L. And it's going to give me some options that are hopefully familiar to you by now, including upcoming meetings. So here's some upcoming meetings that I've made for this specific course, previous meetings that I've made for this specific course, and cloud recordings that I've recorded for this specific course. I don't have any in here right now. All of these tabs are available to everybody in my class lists. So any student in this D2L site can step on this Zoom link and they can see upcoming meetings, previous meetings, or cloud recordings. it makes it very, very easy to keep your Zoom meetings for a particular class organized. And Gary, to your point specifically, this is how I would recommend you actually come in and build your class, because now you don't even have to invite them or remember to post that link. If I was building a Zoom meeting for my class and I wanted everybody to join in, then I would come to D2L, step on Zoom, and hit schedule a new meeting. This is exactly the same set of options that we have seen a few times now, including recording meeting automatically, requiring a password, enabling join before host, setting recurring meeting and setting a time. All of those options still exist right there. And now it will just plop this meeting right down here in D2L under this Zoom tab. And only my students will be able to see that and click on it and get into it. Other students in other classes will not be able to see that. And I don't have to remember to post anything. So this is a very powerful tool. But like a lot of powerful tools, it's double-edged. So there's something very important I want to talk about. And that is that this meeting and any recordings that happen in this meeting are automatically available to everybody in the class. I can't create a meeting through this Zoom integration in D2L and tie it to only one student or only a group of students. Everybody's going to be able to join this meeting. And if I make a recording, everybody's going to be able to see that recording. So let me walk you through a perfect storm, something you need to think about. If I'm creating a new meeting, everybody in the class is going to be able to see it. And if I come down here and I click both of those two options we talked about before, enable join before host, that means a student is going to see this link directly in their D2L site, and they can click and get into the meeting without me being there, without the start time having happened yet. And if I click record the meeting automatically in the cloud, it's going to kick off a recording of that student jumping into that meeting. If I've set the participant video to be on, or if a student overrides that video and they turn on their video, now we've got the perfect storm of a student who maybe didn't realize what they were doing, jumping into a meeting because they wanted to test their equipment, or they maybe thought it was time, any number of legitimate reasons, but they jumped into a meeting, the host wasn't there, a recording kicked off, and that recording is going to be available to all the other students in that class. And while that sounds like a whole lot of ifs, we have seen that happen before. So I would encourage you not to turn all of these options on, and to be very transparent and clear with your students as to what's going to happen if they jump into a meeting early or if they create a recording. Your students have all the same options in Zoom that you do, so they can come in and create their own meeting. Remember, we said that students have a full pro Zoom account as being part of ETSU. They can come in here and schedule a meeting themselves. Other students could join that meeting and they could record that. So this may be a powerful way for you to have the students present to you, or make an asynchronous recording as part of an assignment. Just recall that it's public to everybody in that class. So students who create meetings, all other students are going to see that. Students who create recordings through here, all other students are going to see those recordings. So I know I'm hammering that home quite a bit, but that's a very important point. And I see a chat here from Penny. Thanks, Penny. So going through D2L, you don't have to send out an email invite. That is correct. If you want all your students to join a meeting, I would do it through D2L. Makes it very easy and difficult to forget something as the host or as the instructor. Just make sure it's something you want all your students to be able to see and join.
I think I missed something, Anthony.
Go ahead, Gary.
Can you go back to that screen you just left about scheduling a meeting?
Yeah, absolutely.
When I put my course name in under topic.
Oh, yeah, your course name. It's going to default to the course name, but you can edit that or you can add to it. So maybe this is going to be my my lecture session, and it's going to repeat every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at the time of the lecture. So I'd set the right date, time, and recurrence, and then I would hit save. And if I click back on Zoom, there's my lecture session. But maybe I want a different meeting that happens on Tuesday and Thursday, and that's office hours, virtual office hours. So I might set that to be a different time. And when students click into Zoom, now they get a pretty clear indication that, okay, this one today is for the lecture session, and this one, I didn't change the time, so it's the same, is for office hours. If I repeat one, use the recurring method, so this is test review. And test review is going to happen every single Monday, but we only have 2 more tests. So it's going to happen for the next 3 weeks. Then I hit save and go to Zoom in D2L. Notice that I have 3 new test review meetings. One on the 23rd, one on the 30th, and one on the 6th. It's the exact same meeting ID, but the students get a very clear indication of what's coming up. And as the host, I can start this. As a student, they could come in here and they could join this at the appropriate time. Does that help, Gary?
Well, have we gotten to the point where we've got our participants?
Yeah, so anybody in the class list for this, since we're in a D2L class, your D2L class already has its students put into it automatically through Banner. You don't have to add them in. They'll automatically be there if they're signed up for your course. And everybody on your class list, there's your class list right there, is going to be able to see all of these options without sending them a specific invite or sharing that meeting ID with them.
All right, thank you.
No problem. Great questions. Any other questions? Anne-Marie, I see you've got one up here. Let me read through it. Yes, Anne-Marie. So your question here is about setting up meetings for somebody else. You can do that in a couple of different ways. I'm going to come back over here to the web portal. I'm going to schedule a new meeting. If I was scheduling on behalf of somebody else, if I wanted them to be the host and I was not going to be included in this at all, I didn't need to get the recordings, I don't need to go back in and edit things, then I would ask that person to allow me to set up a Zoom meeting for them, and they're going to do that under their settings here. They would do that for you. And then I can come in here and create a meeting for them. So I could create one for Mark here. He's my colleague. I have all the exact same settings, but when I hit save, it's going to create a meeting under his name. He'll be able to start it as the host, and I don't have to be involved anymore. If I want to be involved, I may be there, and I'm going to help host the meeting, but I want other people to be there as well, other faculty and staff. Then as I create the meeting, I would come down here, and I would add them as an alternative host. Either one of those options will work, and I suggest trying both, playing around with it, and seeing which one works best for you, Anne-Marie. Great questions. We're coming to the end of our time. I want to make sure we briefly touch on some best practices and some tips to help your meetings go successfully. As we said before, test your audio and video. That will stop 90% of your problems. Just testing your audio and video before you get in. If you're the host and you're planning on sharing content, it's a good idea to have that content up and ready. So when you share your screen in the recording and your participants don't see you hunting around for your files or putting in your USB drive or whatever you have to do in order to bring that up, unless bringing that up is part of what you want to show them. Also, remember that as you record your meeting and you share your screen, anything that is popping up, making a noise or giving you a notification, like an email program, it's going to continue to do that if you haven't turned it off. And the same is true, and this catches me all the time, with your phone. So if you're near an office or you have your cell phone with you, remember to mute that or put it on sleep mode so that it's not disturbing you during your live meeting. I tend to mute my microphone if other people are talking, especially if they're talking at large. That way I'm not accidentally creating any noise or static or anything that's going to compete for their attention. Something we haven't talked about, but everybody has the option for, up in the very top right of their, I'm going to bring this over here, up in the top right of their screen, they have a gallery view. So right now you can see on my screen, I see several people's videos up at the top, and then whoever spoke last in the center. And if I hit gallery view, it changes it so that everybody's got kind of equal part of the screen. So if you're collaborating with a small group of people and everybody's using your video, this gallery view works a little bit better than just a speaker view. And when I change that, it doesn't change it for everybody, it just changes it for me. So your participants can control that the way they see fit. Annotations, you saw me using that a little bit. That's where I have the ability to draw on the screen, and I can draw on absolutely anything that I'm sharing. Some tips on your camera: position your camera at or slightly above eye level. Sometimes you're in a situation like I'm in a lab and I don't have a lot of control over my camera. But if you do, try to do that. And make eye contact. That can be a little bit difficult if you are using multiple screens to share your content. But as much as possible, try to look at the camera. It takes a little bit of practice of getting used to it. We looked at that. Again, just a reminder of some of the resources you have available. This one right here, etsu.edu/Zoom. Again, that's probably the only one you really need to remember because you can get to everything else through that. We have a lot of help on different technologies. We've already touched on D2L a little bit, but other things to help you get up and running with remote learning at ATS. This is your specific Zoom portal. That's where you will log in. Again, that is linked directly off etsu.edu/Zoom. And over here are a couple of test meetings. So you can jump into these, you can share these with your students, and they can test their Zoom setup. They can get into a quick little 5-minute meeting that nobody else is in, play around, they can't hurt anything. And this is a really good idea to help them get comfortable with things and to test their hardware and their software before you have something that is more important going on. And guys, I really appreciate you joining in remotely. I know this isn't always the way that we want to do things, but we're trying to model good behavior with everything that's going on. Are there any questions or concerns that I can help you with right now, or something you'd like to take a deeper look at? All right, well, what I recommend is that you get into Zoom. You all have accounts. Feel free to go in, create a little test meeting, throw a colleague or a friend or even one of us in there. We'll jump in with you, play around with it. As you do that, you may come up with more questions or concerns, jot them down, reach out to us in a number of different ways. You can email us at ats@etsu.edu. You can call us at 439-8611, and we will be happy to help get you up and running. All right, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and close this down. Please let me know if you have any other questions. Oh, I see one from Adriana. If I create a meeting for someone else, do I automatically select record? That is up to them. So I would talk to them about that. That's a very, very good question. It's oftentimes a preference of whoever is running the meeting. Somebody might be upset if they weren't planning on recording that meeting and you set it up for them and they get in and suddenly it's created a recording. Again, if you're not going through D2L, then you can always delete that recording. And I think it's better to have it and not need it and delete it than to not have it, because you can't go back and record something that happened in the past. So I would just reach out to them and ask them what they prefer. I don't know that I would default to having it on. Most web conferencing tools that I've used don't have an automatic recording, so people may be used to hitting that record button when and in what situation they want to do that. Very good question.
Thank you, Anthony.
All right, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. If you need anything else, don't be shy. Don't hesitate to reach out to our office. We're here and we're happy to help.
Thank you.
Yes, I have everybody's email who registered, Anne-Marie, and I can send this PowerPoint over to you. If you want it, you're absolutely welcome to it. I'll send it over to you. Now I'll send it to everybody.
Please do.
All right, thanks everybody. Have a very good morning.
You too.